Welcome to Museum Archipelago. I'm Ian Elsner. Museum Archipelago is your audio guide through the landscape of museums. Each episode is never longer than 15 minutes, so let's get started. By the turn of the 20th century, museum fatigue was already a documented phenomenon. Hilarious cartoons showed exhausted visitors craning their necks to read labels and stooping over to examine artifacts. An article in the 1928 issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association recommends that museum fatigue can be avoided by placing labels and descriptions at human scale and providing stools and chairs in thoughtful places. The article finishes by saying that these changes turn a museum from an extensive storehouse where people get tired into a true temple for the muses. I love how dramatic that is.
Otters and oil don't mix.
Let's listen to that again.
Otters and oil don't mix.
Otters and oil don't mix. That's the title of a former exhibit at the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. This is presented by Beverly Sorrell, who wrote the book on museum labels, as a good example of a title that supports the main idea. The main idea is important because a strong exhibit is one that visitors understand. Visitors will simply ignore galleries that they don't understand. It's also important, from the designer's point of view, to constantly refer to the main idea while developing an exhibit. Each component of the exhibit must justify itself by answering the question, how do I support the main idea? In Otters and Oil Don't Mix, the main idea was that damage to otters and ecosystems caused by the Exxon Valdez oil spill were extensive, expensive, and unforgettable. The title and each component of the exhibit contribute to the big idea. The title is an even simpler way to express that big idea. One of the pillars of user experience design is a focus on the audience and what the audience wants. Many people think that user experience design is most successful when the audience is divided into tiny segments, and each of those segments is studied and accounted for. Beverly Sorrell says that there really isn't a need for that in museums. A diverse cross-section of visitors will be attracted to a popular exhibit. When something works, it tends to work for many people. Instead, she says, museums must address visitors' basic drives.
The restrooms are to the right.
Before getting into the higher-up desires.
Please do not touch the artwork.
Before getting to the reason they came to the museum in the first place.
Press here for self-actualization.
Age is actually the biggest differentiator between audience experiences. Younger people are less likely to read labels, and older people are less likely to push buttons and interact with interactives. Here, the label can address a certain audience while not being distracting to another audience.
No, seriously, adults. It's okay to press this button.
The labels set the tone and learning style of an exhibit. One trend over the last 50 years is becoming less authoritative. Instead of saying, here is the knowledge and the truth that you should learn, it's becoming increasingly common to introduce information in the multiple meanings context. That is to say, this is what some people believe to be true. The shift in authority is part of a broader cultural trend across all disciplines. It's partially a response to the postmodern idea that each museum should be an experience in which the visitor interprets information instead of just a hall to study inside of. Think of how the Journal of the American Medical Association described a museum as an extensive storehouse where people get tired. What this leads to is an even more authoritative tone for things that actually can be authoritative. I remember the first plaque at the National Museum of Natural History's Fossil Hall. It was an authoritative description of the Big Bang, and it was striking to me. The label didn't begin with, "some people think." Instead, it just said, boom, the Big Bang occurred 13 billion years ago or whatever.
Boom, the Big Bang occurred 13 billion years ago. Or whatever.
Beverly Sorrell cautions against writing like a journalist on the labels. A journalist would put the most interesting, relevant part of the story at the beginning. There's an expectation that most people won't get through the entire article, and that the length of the article is defined by the editor, not the writer. Since an exhibit designer can determine the length of the label, they should make it short enough for everybody to read the entire thing. And come on, put the label short enough so that nobody has to crane their neck to read it. This has been Museum Archipelago. If you like the show, you can support me by joining Club Archipelago. In exchange for your support, you'll get access to a new premium audio feed that guides you further behind the scenes of museums. You can join the club by going to patreon.com/museumarchipelago or looking in the show notes for this episode. For more information or to submit feedback, go to museumarchipelago.com or museum_go on Twitter. Next time, bring a friend.